You're listening to Best Forevers, a podcast for kindred spirits, a podcast that encourages you to love more in your friends and to further consider the issues that plague friendships. I'm Alysa Lucas, and let's see what's going on. Just a global pandemic, like a really interesting political environment, the impossibility of remote teaching, a fractured tailbone and a sprained ankle, and not seeing friends and family forever. Ugh, it's the worst, right? But I'm sure with all this going on, I could just snap out of it and know that it's all happening for a reason, right? No. A trending topic we must talk about is toxic positivity. Because when things around us are bad, is sticking to nothing but good vibes only, that might be more problematic than helpful. So in today's episode, we'll discuss what toxic positivity is, how it can be dangerous, and what impact it may have on our friendships. We often view positivity as a good thing, right? Being positive certainly seems better than being negative, but with the light, there is always the dark. So in this case, too much positivity may cause havoc. You can find my sources and show notes as always, but an overall read of these articles and blog posts is that toxic positivity occurs when one focuses on living with a positive mindset and nothing less than that positivity. A 2019 article from Psychology Today by Konstantin Lukin states, quote, "The phrase toxic positivity refers to the concept that keeping positive and keeping positive only is the right way to live your life. It means only focusing on positive things and rejecting anything that may trigger negative emotions," end quote. And I like this quote from a 2020 Washington Post article by Alysa. She quotes Natalie Dattilo, a clinical health psychologist, who said, quote, "While cultivating a positive mindset is a powerful coping mechanism, toxic positivity stems from the idea that the best or the only way to cope with a bad situation is to put a positive spin on it and not dwell on the negative. It results from our tendency to undervalue negative emotional experiences and overvalue positive ones," end quote. How many of you are feeling this? Like, maybe you're like, ooh, maybe I do positive vibes only a little too much, or maybe we push those negative emotions down here or there, especially in a pandemic. How many of you are like, maybe I do that to my friends? All right, well, let's talk more, okay? So additionally, toxic positivity includes faking the positivity. Sure, we've all heard the saying, fake it till you make it. But if we only experience positivity and none of the negativity, there may be a need to pause out of concern. On the Science of People webpage, quote, "Toxic positivity is the feeling of acting happy or cheerful when you're really not. It's that fake kind of happiness people say to you, like, just cheer up, or it'll get better, don't worry, when something really bad happened to you. Toxic positivity is inauthentic happiness and could cause damage in personal and professional relationships," end quote. A very useful article on the Psychology Group webpage by Quintero and Long from 2019 illustrates why we should have this concern, why we might pause in concern. So the authors define, quote, "toxic positivity as the excessive and ineffective overgeneralization of a happy, optimistic state across all situations. The process of toxic positivity results in the denial, minimization, and invalidation of authentic human emotional experience," end quote. So in general, positivity is inherently good, but so is social support, love, friendliness, and so many other things that we enjoy in life as humans and as humans in relationships. But too much of something, or if that something is poor or ineffective, we then see the dark side. And that's where on this podcast, we want to recognize it, understand it, and consider what we can do about it. The description of toxic positivity reminds me of something my dad often says: everything in moderation, including moderation. Additionally, in that Chew article, the same psychologist compares toxic positivity to ice cream. She states, quote, "Think of it as having too many scoops of ice cream. It's really good and it makes us feel better, but you can overdo it. Then it makes us sick." Or try shoving ice cream into somebody's face when they don't feel like having ice cream. that's not really going to make them feel better, end quote. I think that's a great metaphor. So let's talk about some of the issues that result from toxic positivity so we consider how to have it in our lives so we're not making ourselves sick and we're not shoving it in other people's faces. Okay, so I think the ice cream metaphor by Natalie DiTillo indicates precisely why toxic positivity is a problem. Because we can do it to ourselves and to our friends. And that can lead us down a path of some issues that we might have to deal with, right? For example, Science of People offers Ned Flanders from The Simpsons as an example of excessive positivity. And to me, that is a chef's kiss of an example because we can see how constant positivity from Ned infuriates Homer. Is it because he feels like Ned is rubbing it in his face? Maybe Homer can't relate to Ned, or maybe it feels like Ned never experiences negativity, and so it might feel like a social comparison, or it could feel like Homer is never supported in his experiences, as if his experiences are not valid. And so we have the hidey-ho. No, that is Home Improvement. What does he say? I can't even think of what he says, but he has this little greeting. Oh gosh, that's gonna bother me. Okay, pause. Okay, so Google tells us that it's Oakley Dokley. So I guess on this fine morning, I just had a brain fart. So it's not Heidi Ho, that's Home Improvement's neighbor. The neighbor in The Simpsons is Ned Flanders, and he's Oakley Dokley. And everything, he's always got a positive tone. He has a positive spin on everything, even when Homer might be mistreating him a little bit. So maybe Ned Flanders is being a little toxic towards himself. Okay. But I think there's a lot of things that can come from having that positivity constantly in our face, right? So the first one we have to consider is that if we're doing it to our friends or we're even doing it to ourselves, we can invalidate our friends' feelings or our own feelings. So in a Body Plus Soul blog post, the author Edwina Carr Barraclough describes it as sugar-coated gaslighting. So it seems we need to be mindful of what we say to our friends because, as stated, quote, it essentially yanks the validity of a person's genuine feelings out from underneath them and makes them feel somewhat responsible for their situation, end quote. The same post quotes clinical psychologist Gemma Cribb, quote, toxic positivity can be harmful as it minimizes a person's pain and distress, and it indicates to some extent that they are responsible for their own suffering. It also suggests that you don't want to listen to what is going on for them and you only want to be around them when they're happy, end quote. So, I mean, thinking about the qualities of friendship as we talk about a lot on this podcast is that one of the things that our friends are there for is support, or when we are having low times that oftentimes our friends will be there for us. But if for whatever reason we don't want negativity in our life, or we feel like it's negative all the time, or we have prescribed to this good vibes only sort of life living, then we can really put down our friends in a way that might make them not want to be around us anymore, right? We might brush things aside. We might use the common phrase like, it's fine, everything's going to be fine. And then we might convey a problem is not a concern and doesn't need any attention whatsoever. You could even be commenting on a Facebook post with, quote, sending you positive vibes, end quote, could come across as stuffing positive vibes right up one's keister, right? Like maybe it's like even thinking about what do we leave on a post? Is it fine to give positive vibes to acquaintance, but what if it's a close friend? We might have those conversations online as well as in person or over Zoom or on our phones. In Science of People, they name this the fair weather friend. This is the friend that might only be around when things are fun and great and positive, and then poof, they're gone when even that there's the smallest sign of an issue or a problem or any sense of negativity. According to the article, quote, they will tell you to cheer up. They might make up an excuse or, hey girl, you better stop bringing those bad vibes my way, end quote. In this case, it's not just invalidating a friend's feelings, but it could be invalidating the friendship. Like, this relationship is only important if it's fun, upbeat, and problem-free, but that's not life, right? We need to consider that we're friends no matter the weather. So when it's rainy, pull out an umbrella. It's not like, hey, put some sunglasses on. Well, even if I have sunglasses on, it's still raining, right? And that means the problem is still there. Okay? Second, one of the issues that comes from toxic positivity is that we can reject negative emotions. Across all the sources I read, that was the one point that was incredibly clear. And that is that toxic positivity means we might not pay attention to our negative emotions. Sure, as humans, we love good times and positivity, but that's not reflective of reality and the human experience, especially in 2020 and 2021. Am I right? So, Lucan, who I mentioned before from that 2019 Psychology Today article, quote, avoiding negative emotions reinforces this idea because you avoid feeling them, you tell yourself that you don't need to pay attention to them. While you are trapped in this cycle, these emotions become bigger and more significant as they remain unprocessed, end quote. Lucan continued, quote, by avoiding difficult emotions, you lose valuable information. For example, when you're scared, your emotions are telling you, quote, be aware of your surroundings. Emotions themselves are information. They give you a snapshot of what's going on at a given moment, but they don't tell you exactly what to do or how to react, end quote. So the way I look at this, and I really liked the article by Lucan in focusing on these negative emotions because we need negative emotions. They suck, right? Truly. But we need them because life isn't all puppy dogs and ice cream, a quote from Swingers, a movie from 1996. So when we do reject negative emotions of others, they can, like Jen Selby said in an October 2020 article with Refinery 29, you make one feel bad for feeling bad. And the thing about it is, I mean, we've heard the slogans, it's okay to not be okay. We shouldn't have to put up this feeling and act as if negative emotions don't exist because they do, especially in a year like this or the last year. We're coming up on a year on the pandemic in America, right? So even more, Jen Selby highlights the point that most of us will flip a switch and become happy just because someone else tells us to smile more or to look at the brighter side of things, right? That always makes me feel really good is when someone tells me to like calm down. Guess what? I'm not calm. Guess what? Just because you say so doesn't mean a smile is going to come across this face of mine. In reality, the pandemic is hard and cancer sucks and we all work way too hard and we don't get paid enough and all the cat videos and the fun Bernie Sanders memes in the world will not solve these issues. It can have a temporary reprieve from those emotions and we can distract ourselves. And I think that can be helpful. But in the long term, those are not the things by just completely avoiding all negative stuff. That's not really going to help us. So in Chu's article, Stephanie Preston, a professor of psychology at the University of Michigan, indicates that it's a problem when people are forced to seem or be positive in situations where it's not natural or when there's a problem that legitimately needs to be addressed that can't be addressed if you don't deal with the fact that there is distress or need, end quote. And essentially, if we bottle up negative emotions, we let them fester until they explode, much like a tea kettle on the stove. It simmers and simmers and simmers, and then the kettle blows to let you know that it's boiling, right? That can happen to us. And the science of people would label this the negative jar buildup. When that jar is full, the top is going to get blown off. And then we might have even a more negative situation because of how we handled it or just that we never handled anything in the past. We might be good intention and we may need some doses of positivity, but suppressing negative emotions can cause a whole host of other issues. It can be bad for us emotionally, mentally, socially, professionally, and physically. So a third issue that comes from toxic positivity is that we develop that inauthenticity that some of the sources talked about in the definition of toxic positivity. If we continue to fake positivity, we may feel disconnected from ourselves. Okay, so I know we all participate in habitual events of positivity to make it day to day in this world, right? Like politeness with greetings. Hey, how are you? Fine, how are you doing? Like you don't unload all your problems at that time, right? And I think that's one thing, right? That's one thing that we do to fulfill sort of a social norm. But it's another thing altogether to fake positivity every single day through every single situation, especially when you have serious issues that you need to cope with, like an ill parent, the loss of a job, difficulties with children at school, whatever it might be. But also think of this. It's an example that I saw online as I was reading for this episode. Let's say you lost a job 2 years ago, and as you've been looking for your jobs, you've unfortunately been turned down each time you go to an interview or you don't get callbacks for your resume, and then you go to talk to your friends about it. So when each time that happens, they say something like, there's a better job out there for you. And they say that every single time over 2 years. That statement may mean nothing, or it might be that ice cream to the face. So we do have to consider that what we're doing to continue our relationships and thinking about the messages that we send, that even if we live by that positivity, even though that can be harmful to us, that doesn't mean that's what's best for our friends or the people around us. And that by continuing to do that, not only are we disconnected from ourselves, we are disconnected from other people, which can lead into the last problem associated with toxic positivity. And it's sort of a catch-all of you might experience other issues, right? Because the continued use of toxic positivity leads to being disconnected, as discussed previously, it can also lead to things like being more isolated. And we're already isolated in the pandemic, and then you might create a larger divide between you and some of your most significant relational friends or partners. And Science of People indicates it can make us more sad, right? That we have this continuation of avoiding things and not taking them head on, and we might not be feeling like ourselves. And so that becomes, it makes us feel worse. It can also, according to that same webpage, make us more insensitive. So we might just return with one of those quips, but it doesn't show empathy, right? It doesn't show your friend that you understand what they're going through. It shows that you are not putting yourself in their shoes and trying to see it from their point of view. And according to Quintero and Long, we can find ourselves shaming or chastising others for expressing frustration or anything other than positivity. So not only might we not show that we are empathetic to our friends, we can just show overall that anything but positivity is unacceptable. Those people might distance themselves from us, and we may seem less relatable and less empathetic, kind of like the example from Ned Flanders, which is Oakley Dokley, right? Okay, just had to put that back out there. I've watched so much Simpsons. It's a great show, and brain fart, right? So what can we do about it, right? Like, we can clearly see that there are problems that we might experience. It's worth a consideration of what we say to ourselves, what we say to other people, and the impact that it might have on us, especially during a time of isolation and difficulties with connections to other people. So it certainly impacts us with our self-talk. We might focus on telling ourselves to snap out of it, or we may be communicating excessive good vibes with our friends when they just want us to say, you know what, that sucks. I can't believe it's just so hard to continuously put yourself out there for a job and then get rejected. I don't know what to say. I don't know exactly how to help, but can I just sit with you here in this anger? Can we share that together? Because I'm so mad. It sucks, right? There are several ways we can work on putting out positive vibes, right? So the first thing is we need to recognize toxic positivity. The Black Girl Affirmed blog provides signs of toxic positivity, which is also outlined by Quintero and Long, including first, hiding and masking your true feelings, right? So covering up sadness or anger or so on and so forth with happiness. Number 2, trying to just get on with it by stuffing and dismissing an emotion. It is what it is, whatever, move on. snap out of it. The third one is feeling guilty for feeling negative emotions, right? So if you've been chastised by other people, or you feel like that's not going to help you live a positive life, then you feel guilty that you are sad or upset. And these are emotions that, even if they're not the most fun to have, they're helpful to the human experience, right? The fourth sign of toxic positivity on the Black Girl Affirmed podcast is minimizing other people's experiences with the quote unquote feel good quotes or statements, right? So there is right now a lot of, maybe we can call it positivity porn, right? And I think a good quote here or there is helpful to stay motivated. I can say that I posted them on my Instagram stories, or I've shared them, and for sure. But if it's like every single day it's a positive quote and you're just like, oh my God, can I just sit in my sadness for a couple days without having something like, if you just put a smile on your face, you'll, turn that frown upside down. You're like, sometimes I don't want to hear it. Okay. Stuff that. Right. Number 5, a sign of toxic positivity is trying to give someone perspective. It could be worse, instead of validating their emotional experience. It can always be worse, for sure. And 2020 has told us, hold my beer. I'm about to show you how it could be worse, right? But it's one of those things, like, if you say it could be worse, then it's saying, like, your problem doesn't matter, right? Like, that's why are you even upset about that? And then shaming or chastising others for expressing frustration or anything other than positivity, as I mentioned from Quintero and Long previously. And then finally, brushing off things that are bothering you with it is what it is. So there are a lot of statements you might say. And as a communication person, I'm really interested in the words we choose, because the words that we choose to communicate convey a lot of meaning. And so changing our language can help change our meaning and maybe change how we're perceived or how we can help our friends, for example. So a second way to deal with the positive vibes is to understand why others do it, right? So Science of People spent some time talking about that positivity is a great way in which to cope, right? That it's an effective coping mechanism, right? I see all the time on Facebook, I'm having a bad day. Show me your animals. Show me pictures of your cats. Show me pictures of your dogs. Gift me, meme me, all those sorts of things. Like, going through it can be a way to sort of distract yourself for a little bit, make it through the day. And I don't know about you, but seeing cats and dogs, no matter how I feel, makes me feel better, right? Following a lot of people on Twitter that deal with animals, or on Facebook or Instagram, then my feed is full of these cute furry babies, right? And I'm all about it. And I have to say that I cackled, and I haven't experienced that much happiness than the 2 or 3 days that I spent watching and sharing and seeing all those memes of Bernie Sanders sitting in the chair with his mittens. I don't know what it was. It just cracked me up. And so it can be helpful. But here's the thing. Bernie went viral for a couple days, right? That at the end of the day, even if you saw 250 pictures of cats, you still might have to deal with the issue that you have in front of you, right? The one that you're distracting yourself from. Is it with work? Do you have to go in the next day and handle something? Then you have to spend some time figuring out how you're going to deal with it. It can't just be like, again, I'm going in with sunglasses no matter the weather, right? Like, we sometimes just have to face things head on. A third way to deal with toxic positivity is to disengage from social media. So I've joked that, during the last couple years or more, especially in the last year when I've been home for 99% of the time, that I spend a good hour on Twitter before I might get out of bed doom scrolling, right? But maybe for toxic positivity is seeing that positivity porn, right? That everyone only posts their positive things on on Facebook and Instagram. Like, it's the good photo. I mean, honestly, I took 20 photos of Finn in the snow this week because he's adorable. But then the one that where his eyes are all weird and, he's like derping. I didn't share that one, right? Even I share the cutest photo of my dog. Why do we do this, right? We have to remember that social media is just a highlight reel or just a snapshot. It doesn't include all of our experiences. And so then it can feel like, again, a way that invalidates our feelings or experiences because we might only post positive things. So we've talked about this before in the podcast. You think about fear of missing out or FOMO, which there's an episode about that, and social comparison, that in a lot of ways, social media might make us feel worse. So if we feel, if there is an account that is only positive, you're like, okay, maybe I'll keep this one, but maybe I'll mute that one for 30 days. There's lots of things we can do, or maybe we just at some point need to sign off, right? And I'm saying this not to you all necessarily, but maybe to myself as well, right? Turn that finger around back at you, Alysa. Okay, the fourth one would be that we don't have to worry about being an expert with our friends. So one of the things is we don't have to come in and be like, all right, the doctor is in, right? Lay down on my couch. I will fix all of your issues, right? So Science of People says some people just want to be heard. You don't need to be like, let me give you advice. Let me solve your problems. In fact, they say, don't offer advice unless asked. So otherwise, sympathize. So that's a direct quote from them. Don't offer advice unless asked. Otherwise, sympathize. I like that. It feels like there's a sing-songy nature there to help us remember that. The fifth way that we can deal with toxic positivity is, and you knew this is probably coming, is to welcome those negative emotions in your life, right? We just need to, and when we think about it, like self-care sort of takes this positive spin. It might be associated with toxic positivity. This is just a thought I'm having right now as I record this, so off the cuff. So it's sort of interesting. Do we think that self-care might contribute to sort of this good vibes only? Like, what are ways that we can take care of ourselves? And it's always like, take a bath and put a mask on. Not a mask like social distance. I mean like a mask in the bath, right? But self-care to me doesn't seem like it always needs to be that. Sometimes self-care is paying attention to your negative feelings, right? And so Lucan, who had that great article on how we avoid negative emotions, talks about how emotions aren't necessarily good or bad, all positive or all negative. He says, instead think of them as guidance. Quote, emotions help us make sense of things, end quote. He continues, quote, emotions are not only a way for our mind to clue us into what's happening, they also convey information to people around us. If we are sad, it pulls for comfort. If we communicate guilt, it pulls for forgiveness, end quote. And I really like that because as humans, we have other humans around us, even if they're at a distance, like my neighbors who I see when I'm walking Finn, and Finn loves to bark at them, and we have conversations from 20 feet away from each other, and I have to hold Finn so he stops barking. But the idea is that we can have these moments together where, based on how we communicate, we can commiserate and we can help each other or see that someone needs some help. And so without negative emotions, we can't do those things. And, me and my neighbor, we both fell on the ice recently. And so we definitely were standing outside 20 feet away from, maybe less than that, 20 feet away from each other, commiserating over that. And I think that's something we both needed. And we didn't have sunglasses on, friends. It wasn't good vibes only. It was like, let's talk about why we fell on the ice and that sucked and what we're going to do about it and so on and so forth. The next thing, and as a communication person, I love this. It's about changing language. And so there's so many examples in the sources that I'm using here that you can find in the show notes. So Femina is a blog, and it had examples of toxic positivity versus positivity. And it has a whole chart, like things you say that might be toxic and things that are truly more positive and useful or helpful. And so I'll give you a couple, right? So toxic positivities would be like, come on, don't be so negative. Whereas you could say something like, I can see you're going through a tough time. If you need to talk, I'm here, right? So you can see one is completely dismissive and the other one is like, "Ugh, I recognize that you are a human with human emotions and that it doesn't seem to be, positive right now. And so if I can help, I will." So love that. Okay, we have to go to the classic. You just have to suck it up, right? That's toxic positivity, right? So a way to say that instead would be, it's okay to feel sad and let it out. I'm here to listen to it, right? I'm here, as I said earlier, to sit in the anger with you, right? Oh, here's one, right? Success comes with hard work. If you work hard, you will achieve success. Okay. Let me put that on a poster and put that in my bedroom. Okay, maybe we need to talk about toxic negativity next. Okay, so the success comes with hard work. If you work hard, you will achieve success. That's toxic positivity. But the example that the blog gives instead is, I know you've been working hard towards your goal. Different people achieve their goals at different points of time. Would you like to figure out another approach? I'm here for you if you need me, right? You can see the difference between the things that are toxic sound just like, they just sound like slogans, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes those things are motivating. I joked about putting that quote on the wall. I probably have some quotes somewhere in my life that I like or that makes me feel better or helps me think about the issues that I have or it keeps me motivated. But in general, we don't want just someone giving us a slogan each time we're going through something serious, or if we give ourselves a slogan every time, that seems problematic. And honestly, if you're just going to give me some sort of poster quote, then I just need a little machine where I have maybe 10 or 20 of those and I hit a button and it just tells me one of those robotic slogans, right? So the idea is that we need to be more sympathetic, empathetic, and reaching out to the person and understanding them, what they might need. We can ask them, we can consider what we know about them. And I know sometimes we might rely on these cliches or these slogans because we might not know what else to say. So that's what I really like about all these examples in the articles, is that it gives you sort of a repertoire that you can have in your tool belt of things to say when someone is experiencing something negative in their life. They're having a tough time. So in Quintero and Long, 2019, they have some as well. So I'll give you some examples here. It says toxic positivity. Don't think about it. Stay positive. So that's toxic. And what they focus on is acceptance and validation, right? So instead of saying, don't think about it, stay positive, it says, describe what you're feeling. I'm listening. Oh, okay. So when I graduated high school, the seniors, they choose a song. And I feel like my class could not agree to a song. And it ended up being Don't Worry, Be Happy, the song, right? Okay. So that can sometimes be toxic positivity. Sorry, person who wrote and sang that song. But instead of saying Don't Worry, Be Happy, it says, I see that you're really stressed. Is there anything I can do? Or people say failure is not an option. You can say failure is part of growth and success. Delete negativity. It's so easy. Just you have a delete button in life like you have on your laptop. No, we don't have that. So it says suffering is a part of life. You are not alone, right? Again, it's about validating them and accepting that they also have negative emotions and negative experiences. So some other ones that I had, let's see. Never quit, never give up, ever. You can say giving up is all right. In fact, sometimes it's necessary that we give up. Focus on what you want to accomplish. Just be positive. Instead, you can say, I know it's difficult right now and things can easily go wrong, but let's think about what can go right. And this comes from the Mind Journal. Okay. So there's lots of ways. And so I'll share some of these throughout the next 2 weeks before the next episode comes out with the link to the article so you can see, or you can go through my show notes. There's a lot of great ways in which we can change our language or realize what might be considered to be toxic positivity and maybe consider when we might use that. Is it always bad to be positive? No. Again, like my dad said on this podcast, the advice ends with my dad. Everything in moderation, including moderation, right? But I do have one other solution. So the seventh way that you can deal with or cope with toxic positivity, if it's a friend who's being toxic positivity, saying toxic positive things to you, according to that blog on Body Plus Soul, you can call it out. So that's where you could actually have a conversation with your friends and say, I understand, and that your good intention and you want to see the bright side of things, and that's awesome. I love that quote from Harry Potter, Dumbledore, he's always got to look for the light, love it. But right now I'm just really in a spot of sadness, and I'd love if you could sit here with me and talk to me about it. Or can I just vent to you, right? Like, so you could talk to them specifically about it. And, they say call it out. It doesn't necessarily mean like, oh, no, you didn't. Like, don't, it's not necessarily being confrontational in a sense where you come across as even more negative to their positive or aggressive. It's just saying like, hey, I could use a little something else from you right now. And isn't that something that is useful for our friendships and for the humans around us, knowing what we might need from them or what they might need from us? So lots of things going on here. I'd love to hear what you think about toxic positivity. Do you think this is something that you participate in, maybe both for yourself and with others? Or do you find that maybe you only do the positive vibes towards yourself? Maybe you feel like you do the positive vibes towards other people. And why do you think you do that? Do you think you do it because it is uncomfortable? Maybe you don't know what to say, or you're trying to make people feel better, but maybe it's not working, right? Maybe there's a disconnect. And so I'd love to hear any of your stories or experiences with toxic positivity, any of the things that you feel have helped change toxic positivity. I always love to hear those success stories too, right? This idea of like, I figured out what to say, and maybe calling it a success story is toxic positivity. Now, everything I say, I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Is this a problem? But the idea is that sometimes there are people who just maybe by accident or conscious choice figure out a way to resolve something, or they have a friend who just is like beautiful with words, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, how do you always know what to say, right? So if you have any of those examples, I'd love to share them with everyone, because as we go through, a pretty negative time now, that positivity porn might be on the increase. And so it might be something that we need to tackle more often. And so any way that we can help each other out, I love to do that, friends. And certainly, if you have any questions about it, I love to answer questions. I'd love to do the asking for a friend episode where I can answer some of the questions you have. So feel free to message me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. You can also contact me via alysalucas.com, and you can follow Best Forevers Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So until next time, friends, address both good vibes and the bad vibes, because without our friends, who would we be? Thanks for listening to Best Forevers. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe, rate, review, and of course, share with a friend. Please be sure to follow Best Forevers on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Best Forevers Pod, and I'm at Dr. Alysa Lucas on Twitter. You can always find the podcast webpage for more information at bestforeverspod.com, and share your stories of friendship by emailing me at bestforeverspod@gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the movement to love on our friends more, check out the podcast on patreon.com/bestforeverspod. Now, friends, check out this recommended podcast that you must get in your ear holes immediately.
Hi, I'm Sunny Hepburn.
And I'm Brandy Fleeks.
And this is
Book of Lies,
the podcast, where we discuss liars, cheats, and thieves,
scammers, and dirty rotten scoundrels,
So tune in for new episodes every Tuesday to hear about another low-down dirty liar.
And learn how to spot them.
So that's Book of Lies podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast player or on Twitter at Book of Lies Pod, on Instagram at Book of Lies Podcast, and on Facebook at Book of Lies Podcast.
And if you want to send us an email, send us one at bookofliespodcast@gmail.com.
Okay?
Bye-bye.